Anxiety versus concern. Anxiety absorbs other people's responsibilities. So we take on what belongs to somebody else. And sometimes we're in unhealthy healthy relationships where people want to put their responsibilities on us, and we absorb it. It produces anxiety, but concern fulfills my responsibility. Concern fulfills my responsibility. And I'll explain it like this. I saw this one time. Preacher had a can, and on the can it said, "God can." And that's all he had. And I liked it. I was like, that's good. There's some things that only God can do. And when I think about what God can do, the Bible is full, chock full of what God can do, his faithfulness. But as I looked at that illustration, I was like, there's also another can. And that can is the stuff that I can do. And sometimes we get confused about what goes in God's can and what goes in my can. So there's stuff that only I can do, and there's some stuff that only God can do. But the problem with my thoughts is so often for me, I don't know if this is true for you, my mind is already full. I've already got a lot of things that I'm thinking about. So I will often take things that go in God's can, and I'll try to put them in my can, and I just can't fit them in my can because my can is full, and it wasn't intended to go in my can. It was intended to go in God's can. Now, what can happen is I'll obsess over God's can, and then I abdicate my can. So it's like, well, if God would just do his job, but I've got a job over here. Let me explain it like this. You ever met somebody when it comes to finances and they're struggling and they're like, oh, if I could just hit the lotto, oh, it'd solve everything. All my problems would go away. If I could just get that increase or that bonus, or if I could get an inheritance. I don't want anybody to die, but if I could get an inheritance, that'd really solve all my problems. And that would be awesome, but it usually doesn't happen, and that's not in my can or your can. But how about this? You can make a budget, and you can tell your money where to go. You can save money. You can spend less. You can give back to God. You can make a budget, and that's in your can or that's in my can. How about this? Sometimes I have conversations with single guys, and they're like, man, if God would just show me if stars would fall, if he would provide that perfect woman. I'm just waiting on the perfect one. And that's great. Like, God can help you find a wife. But one thing that you can do is you can shower. I just have found women actually find men who shower much more attractive. So I can shower. You get the point, right? There are things that go in your can, and there are things that go in God's can. And sometimes I'm thinking so much about taking care of my family. And as parents, this is so important. Now we live in a generation that is like hyper protective, and you got to have a helmet to go from the first floor to the second floor of the house. It's like, you going upstairs, you got your helmet on? And now in our culture, we're so hyper protective. But did you know that as much as I care about my kids and love my kids, there's one part of this that's in God's can, that's protection. And only God can be the ultimate protector over my life, over your life. The psalmist says, in vain you rise early, in vain you stay up late, you watch through the night, and you toil in your own power. But God, he is the one who watches over the city. He is the one who builds the house. Only God is the protector. How about when it comes to taking care of our family financially and making sure everything works out? Yes, we can build a budget, but there's a part of it that is God can only provide. He's the only one who's the ultimate provider, and he's been faithful to provide for his people for thousands and thousands of years. So I can give to God what belongs in God's can. It is God's can to provide for every need that we have, that when we trust in him, he is faithful to care for us and help us. Here's another one. As I've stepped into my role, maybe some of you, like me, you care what people think about you. And as I stepped into my role, I'm like, I wonder if they'll actually think I'm a good preacher. I wonder if they'll still come to church. I mean, they had Rick Warren for 42 years, and then they got me. Oh my gosh, Stacy and I were talking the other day, and I got invited to be on this Christian podcast, and lots of listeners, and there was another person that was on there, and they were going through like their long list of resume, the books they've written, and like all the things that they've accomplished. And I said, when I go on, they're going to say Andy Wood. Not very impressive, but somehow he ended up as the pastor of Saddleback Church. And then she laughed and she goes, yeah, that's so true. So reputation. Sometimes I can be concerned about reputation. And really, I can't control what other people think about me. That's only God is responsible for reputation. But you know what I can do? I can actually live with integrity, and I can make wise choices, and I can listen to the voice of God and do everything I can to please Him with my life. That's in God's can. I can make a decision to live with love, and I can stand on the patio and hug people and high five and pray over people. And there are some things that only God can do, and there's some things that only I can do.